My name is Michael Nathans. I'm the CEO and one of four co-founders of WhisperSom Corporation. We've got a breakthrough sleep apnea diagnostic and therapeutic device all in one. So let's look at current sleep apnea treatments. What's the problem? They're uncomfortable. And there's three of them, three FDA-approved devices on the market. CPAP, which blows air down your throat all night, and about half the people that try it quit, and most never try it. So the treatment rate's only 5%. And the other is a mandibular advancement device, which locks onto your teeth and holds your lower jaw forward all night to keep your tongue out of your throat. And the third one is a surgical implant called a hypoglossal nerve stimulator. And it sends a little electrical shock to your tongue with each breath, about 5,700 times a night, to hold it out of your throat. So those are the choices. And here's the problem. If sleep apnea is not treated at an early age, if an adolescent has it, it turns into worsens diabetes, ADHD-like symptoms. It's not ADHD, it doesn't produce organic ADHD, but it makes that worse. And leads to depression, learning disabilities, a lot of bad things for kids. And then as adults, it leads to heart attacks, strokes, cancer, very expensive comorbidities that wind up costing Medicare. Believe it or not, this is a huge number. It's hard to believe, but it's true based on the published literature, about $425 billion a year. It's almost half their budget. And the real problem is it's hard to treat kids with the current devices. So we've come up with something that requires nothing on the face, nothing in the mouth, nothing in the nose. It is a breakthrough, closed-loop, non-invasive, personalized sleep therapy. So we call it PST, personalized sleep therapy. I'll get to that in just a minute. But it's got two components. One is a body watch that you wear around your chest at night rather than your wrist, like a health tracker. And it senses every breath, every snore, every pause in breathing to the millisecond. We do very high sampling. And it's a proprietary sensor. It's really impossible to get the kind of data we need to do the treatment we do without anything on the face, like a nasal cannula, measuring nasal flow like they do in a sleep lab. But we've developed a proprietary sensor that you can wear around your chest, and it's a lot more comfortable for people. The second part is this little box you see here. And by the way, everything you see here, we have tested in the field, and it's substantially equivalent to the final version that we're going to bring to the FDA. So we're very far along in our development. But that little box is got a lot of complex hardware and coded software that we've produced ourselves that, again, records everything during the night so it can be played back for diagnostics. And it uploads to the cloud every morning when it's recharged. So this information that we record can go to a physician that's monitoring the patient and can see the next morning if they're doing a diagnosis, what the extent of their sleep apnea is, if they have it at all. Or if it's in the treatment mode, every night, the physician can see how well the treatment's doing for the patient. There's no device on the market that does that. But here's how it works. So we deliver a little sound to earbuds made especially for sleeping. And they're made so that they're very comfortable to lay on your side and they won't come off at night. And they're very customizable in terms of the shape you can put them in. But the sounds stimulate the auditory nerve, and that travels to the midbrain located, right next to your ears where the respiratory pacemaker is. And the respiratory pacemaker fires on a regular basis, like, your heart beats to make you, take an inhalation on a regular basis. But if the signals aren't strong enough, that respiratory pacemaker doesn't fire down the hypoglossal nerve to open the throat to prevent or deal with obstructive apneas. And if you're having a central apnea, the respiratory pacemaker also fires down the phrenic nerve to drive your diaphragm. So those are the two things that are required to take a breath. Your throat has to be open, and the hypoglossal nerve has to be stimulated for that to happen. And you have to actually take a breath by lowering your diaphragm. And the phrenic nerve needs to be stimulated for that to happen, which happens naturally every time you take a breath. But if the signal is not strong enough, one or both don't happen. But when we stimulate at the right time, only when we sense you haven't taken your next breath on time, do we provide a little sound that sounds like this. And we've got 20 different ones, but basically it sounds like this. It's like a whisper. It's very soft. It's not meant to be heard. It's softer than a TV or a white noise machine, but it results in an inhalation within seconds. And it prevents hypoxemia, cardiac stress, and the self-awakenings that disrupt sleep. So it sounds like a simple approach. It is, but to get it to work right, meaning stimulating the respiratory pacemaker at just the right time with just the right kind of signal, so we don't wake people up, but get them to breathe, is what we spent a lot of time and money doing here. So we really knocked the cover off the ball in our test results. It took us about 125 test nights. So if you can imagine me going to people's homes and setting them up with this device and then letting them put it on themselves at night and picking it up the next day and looking at the results 125 times to get this thing tuned so that we're stimulating just right. There are a lot of tunable features to our neuromod settings I won't go into, but the results that we're getting, and the real reason you want to treat apneas, is to keep them short. The longer they last, the worse they are for you. And we've got big reductions in the numbers that matter. The 10-second and 20-second threshold in the industry are really important thresholds. And we really got a great reduction in those metrics. And then the reason you treat apnea is want to keep the duration short is so you don't desaturate. Your blood oxygen doesn't desaturate. That's very bad for you. And it sets off a whole host of adrenergic reactions like the production of adrenaline, really epinephrine, which is adrenaline in the commercial form, to wake you up so that you won't suffocate. When you've gone 40 seconds, had an apnea of 40 seconds, you've tried to inhale against a closed airway about 8 times. Your body thinks you're suffocating, and it's going to do everything to save your life. And it results in spiking your heart rate, releasing epinephrine, which hangs around in your system. It makes you produce glucose that you don't need. It's just bad for you in so many ways, and we totally prevent that. So here's what else we built. We built a system coded from scratch that you can play back everything we record, just like a sleep lab polysomnogram, so you can see what's going on. And what you see here in the upper trace is inhalation. And so when these curves are going up, that's an inhalation. When it's coming down, that's an exhalation. When it goes flat line like this, that means it's an apnea. We start timing it so it doesn't get to 10 seconds and provide a little stimulus. You see this little pink line right here? And this caused an inhalation, in this case, within 1.3 seconds with one stimulus. And we've got about 20 in this file, in this setup here. This one's named frogs. And we played it at about 53, we played it at 53 dB at the ear. And this, by the way, this scrolls across in a video format. You can stop it, pause it, speed it up, slow it down. Again, we coded this from scratch. But this is important. This is what the industry uses from a sleep lab to verify, whatever results. If there's automatic scoring, you really want to see what's going on. So we built it that way for the industry and people's in it to see. So we've filed patents. We've got one awarded, a couple of other applications in the process. We've got more in the pipeline based on what we've learned in developing our proprietary sensor to eliminate anything on the face. And we've got some trademarks. But here's the market is really large. It's $1 trillion global TAM. I mean, that's a big number. It's almost 1 billion people with sleep apnea worldwide. But here's what we're focused on. 680,000 in North America quit their CPAPs every year within 12 months of diagnosis. So these are the people who got a diagnosis 12 months ago, tried it, and either quit after the first month or after the 11th month. But these are people who know that they have a problem, who can't stand the treatment, and we're going to focus on just them to start with. By the way, if you want to make an impact investment, this is very interesting. African Americans are 4 to 6 times more likely to have sleep apnea than white children. So the incidence is higher, 88% higher amongst African American young adults than their white peers. I mean, these are, big differences. And there's nothing we can do about that. We can't solve that. But we sure as can, we can definitely solve the adherence to treatment problem with a more comfortable device. And I think we can really close the healthcare equity gap that exists because of sleep apnea with our device. And it's measurable. I mean, we can measure the numbers of people who are being treated and how they do every night. So here's what's in it for our biggest stakeholders besides patients, which are the ones that pay for these devices, insurance companies, payers. So the cost of WhisperSom is about the same as CPAP, about $1,500. It's got a 4-year device life. And here's how it works based on published data. For people who don't treat their sleep apnea, it costs health insurance companies about $5,000 a year in extra healthcare costs for the comorbidities associated with no treatment. So if we can save them $5,000 a year, and by the way, this is not our model, this is the CPAP ROI model, it's just the same for us. It's 110 days to break even. In other words, they'd get their money, they'd get their $1,500 back in 110 days. They'd have $5,000 over the first year, which is a 300% ROI the first year. And it's the gift that keeps on giving. It's got 4 more years to go. So it's about 1,200% for a total of $20,000 over 4 years savings. Those are the numbers. Very compelling for payers, saves them a lot of money. The problem is no one uses CPAP. So they're not, they're bleeding a lot of money every day. It's the numbers are astonishing. So here's our go-to-market plan. We're going to facilitate rapid uptake as soon as we get FDA fast track approval. And here's how we think we're going to do that. We're going to go for FDA medical breakthrough designation. We've already put in our application. The FDA has responded very favorably. We're in that process. But once we achieve that, and we think we will, the bar we think is pretty low based on their feedback. We think we'll be eligible for fast track FDA approval, a de novo approval with Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement under this FDA breakthrough program. And the reason is our device is inherently safe. It's a very low risk device compared to all these other things. I mean, these are the options right now, and only 5% are treated, and it's costing payers an awful lot every day. So we're educating payers currently through the FDA Payer Communication Task Force. The FDA has introduced us to Aetna and United and all the top payers with a 5-pager using their form and page limit describing our device. But they let us put a lot of hyperlinks in there, so it's really loaded with information. But we want to educate key opinion leaders and physicians who have lists of CPAP quitters, meaning they prescribe CPAP for their patients and they know their patients quit and aren't being treated. And we're going to educate those physicians. Those patients ought to be the first ones to get a call from their physician. And then we want to educate sleep apnea, concussion, and opioid therapy patients. So why concussion? Well, after you've had a concussion, you tend to have central apneas. Our device, unlike CPAP, unlike MADS, unlike hypoglossal nerve stimulation, does not treat central apneas associated with concussions. And obstructive apneas are also associated with concussions, but our device is uniquely suited to treat concussions. And for opioid therapy, because opioids are a central nervous system suppressor, and opioid users tend to have central apneas, which again, our device is uniquely suited to treat. So we've done a sales forecast and sort of took a conservative, a most likely, and an optimistic view. But looking at the most conservative ramp up here, we think we can achieve $121 million in EBITDA in 5 years. And the assumptions are by treating only 0.5% of patients who have sleep apnea. Now, that's 11% of the people in the US who quit every year, but it's only 0.5% of all the patients in the US. We think patients who are newly diagnosed will choose our device over CPAP, but we're not counting on that. We're just looking at CPAP quitters for the purposes of our financial model. But with that 121 of EBITDA, with a 20x on multiple, which is what companies like ours trade for, we think that's a possible exit at $2.4 billion. And if you look at our comps, our closest comps, the Inspire device, that hypoglossal nerve stimulator, costs $30,000 to payers, but it's the current alternative to CPAP. If you fail CPAP, the insurance company will let you have one of those, but you got to fail CPAP first, and it costs $30,000. Insurance companies hate that, I got to tell you. But they've got an $8 billion market cap, and they don't treat very many people considered the total population. And then the leading CPAP maker has a $30 billion market cap, and between them, they're treating less than 5% of the market. I think our device actually has the potential to double the treatment rate from a miserable 5% to a whopping, gee whiz, 10%. And considering the comorbidities, it's well worth the try. And we think we're going to get a lot of support from the payers to do this. But our goal is to execute either a strategic M&A with, the logical suspects you see pictured here in the middle, or do an IPO. And frankly, I would love to run a company with an $8 billion market cap and make it happen quick, because I think we can. But this is the team we have to do it. You see pictured to my right here is Dr. Craig Fied. He sold his last company to Microsoft and ran their first healthcare division for 5 years with 200 doctors and developers and attorneys under him. Filed a lot of patents, sat in the C-suite alongside Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer. And he's actually worked for WhisperSom 2 months longer than Microsoft at this point. He's full-time. He's has a lot of experience with the FDA and he codes in 30 different languages and has helped produce a lot of what we have in-house. David Goldstein, who you see over here is on the left, is the inventor. So I really work for those two guys, along with the rest of our investors, but our medical and scientific advisory board is pretty special. Stuart Kwan is the first doctor I went to see when I took on this journey up at Harvard. Very well-published sleep science researcher, and gave us a lot of good advice and guidance, and hooked us up with Patrick Strollo, who became an advisor. He works at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center in the VA. But he was the doctor who studied the Inspire implantable device and got it through the FDA. And I just met with him yesterday in DC, and his colleague who are going to study our device at the VA at UPMC here shortly. John Handler, I got to mention, is Craig Fied's right-hand man for the technology they built and sold to Microsoft, and came with them to Microsoft and ran it there, and was the innovation officer at Baxter Healthcare, has a lot of good experience, and he's invested $50,000 in the company. And we have some other notables on our advisory board here. But here's our current offering. Here's what we're looking for. We've raised about $5 million so far. We've got a current convertible notes round of $1 million. There's only $475 left because we've sold $525,000 to repeat investors. The $5 million's been raised really largely from Dr. Fied. We have 40 other investors, but we also have the Chair Emeritus of the American Sleep Apnea Association on our board, and is a 4-time repeat investor, because as we've hit milestones, he's been impressed and has put more money in as we've gone, bootstrapped it up. So here's what we've got this half a round left, but we're also looking to raise $2 million in a preferred Series 3 offering for 10% of the company. And here's what we're going to use the proceeds for. We're going to get FDA medical breakthrough device designation in the very near term here, we think. We're going to file a number of new patent applications. We're going to launch a Series A round and go fast track approval for getting this out into the market with insurance reimbursement. So I'd like to continue the conversation with any of you folks who really care about solving, which is considering the comorbidities. A huge problem and a real opportunity to prevent kids. And this is really about prevention. All the other devices are about treatment. Our device has the potential to prevent, because we think it can be adopted by kids at an early age before they develop the comorbidities. But something else I want to mention that's unusual about our company, we have an angel span care sheet, which uses the Bell-Mason score to predict, based on the willingness of the CEO to be voluntarily transparent and do proper reporting to investors. And there's a scientific score called the Bell-Mason score to assess startups objectively on those criteria. And we have one of those. We have it for 2 quarters now, but I do it every quarter. And we're also a qualified small business security, which means that investments in our company are tax-free under IRS Rule 1202. So some good reasons to invest. I'll just leave you with these disclaimers and the notion that time's of the essence for those who struggle to breathe while they're asleep. So we're trying to get this done quick.